From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to OpenLine. I am Ben Hall. Good show tonight. We are looking into a problem that is far too common. We have talked about it on this show before, but we want to invite you to call in with whatever story you may have. Medical malpractice. Has there been a doctor or even a nurse? Have you had some experience that raises questions about the care you received? Happy to have with us an expert on this topic, Clint Kelly, medical malpractice attorney. Thank you for being here.
How you doing? Good
Great.
to see you. Yeah.
Good to see you again. All right, so again, the numbers here are astounding. Where are we as far as medical malpractice when you look nationwide?
Yeah, we are at about 250,000 deaths a year. It is now the third leading cause of death behind heart disease and cancer. And that's the number of deaths. We don't know the number of people who are seriously injured. That number likely exceeds the number of people who die each year.
So is it getting worse or getting better? Are we maybe more aware of it, or is it that doctors are so busy it's getting worse, or what do you think?
I think it is getting worse, and I think the reason that we can prove that is back in 1998, there was a study that was done, and this is when we really started tracking these statistics that showed that the same amount of people who die in a jumbo jet crash died each day from medical negligence. They came up with a figure of about 98,000 or 100,000 people a year, and they've been tracking those statistics every year. Hospitals and doctors now are required to report deaths, and so mortality rates are being kept up, and now we've come up with this figure which is far in excess of what it was back in 1998. So yes, there's some awareness, Ben, but I think it's clear the numbers bear out that the problem's gotten worse.
A jumbo jet crash?
Yeah, that's how many people die each day.
Good grief. And so when you're looking at one of these, there are people out there that think, okay, my situation would warrant possibly talking to an attorney. What should they go through? What's on the list that you're looking for and they should be thinking about?
Yeah, the two considerations in my mind that I always tell people is look for or have you experienced a major medical mistake that causes a major injury or death. If you've got those two things together, then you have a claim that's worthy of an investigation. And you know, it's very easy for someone to simply pick up the phone and make a call and get a consultation, because the consultation's free and the client or patient pays nothing unless there is a recovery. So if there's any doubt whatsoever about whether or not someone got bad medical care and it caused a major injury, just simply pick up the phone and call me or another board-certified medical malpractice attorney for an opinion.
Now, you've also heard the other side. There are people that say medical malpractice and attorneys, they're driving up the cost of health care. And things are out of control. I mean, you've heard these things. When you hear that, you know, what do you say?
Well, there's a number of things. First of all, the number of medical malpractice cases over the last 8 to 10 years have been steadily decreasing. The doctor's insurance company and the hospital's insurance companies, they will verify that. The legislature will verify that. They keep track of how many malpractice cases are resolved each year. We have to report this online. So there's been a steep decline. So in response to the question of things being out of control, that's completely false. But with regard to driving up health costs because people file lawsuits, it is a fraction of what the entire budget or pie of healthcare costs are. And I guess what I would say to anybody is, you know, we all pay for car insurance so that we get on the road. If someone injures us, we have protection. By the same token, part of our healthcare dollars go to help finance medical malpractice insurance coverage if, God forbid, one of us gets seriously injured or killed because of someone's major medical mistake. And, you know, the family's left to pick up the pieces. We have to have a civil justice system, Ben, to address these, or you know what will happen? You'll have patients' families going out in the street and shooting doctors. And that's what happens in Colombia and South American countries, because they can't get justice in court, so they take justice into their own hands. We have a court system in place, and that's to keep the peace and also allow for some measure of justice.
It has gotten harder. I mean, when I go back to, you know, what should someone be thinking about if they're going to try and file one of these things? It's gotten harder, right?
Yeah. Oh, no question.
And in what ways has it gotten harder?
Well, first of all, you have to give pre-suit notice, and you have to make sure that when you file your lawsuit, you have an expert on board. And I personally have no trouble with that. I don't believe that you should sue any professional unless you have another professional who's willing to testify that there's been some negligence. I think that's the right thing to do. But in so far as getting the case to court, there are so many landmines that have to be maneuvered to get your case to court, and if you step on one, you can blow your whole lawsuit up. And I think probably the most difficult part of these cases is the jury itself, the Tennessee jury. It's an extremely conservative jury the vast majority of the time. And so the burden of proof, I think, over the course of the years has risen. Used to be, I thought you could prove a case, win by 60-40. Nowadays, I think juries require you to convince them, I'm not going to say beyond a reasonable doubt, but to basically a moral certainty that there was some medical negligence or healthcare negligence. You're going to lose. It's just, I don't know if it's the environment that we live in. Maybe people are just opposed to these cases in general. My discussions with jury and jury selection tells me that they simply hold doctors and hospitals higher on a pedestal, and so it's harder to get justice in those cases.
They're very reluctant to say, okay, so-and-so messed up.
You like your doctor?
I do.
So do I. You see what I mean?
That's true, yeah,
you see
you're
what I mean? That's not the defendant, it's someone else. But we come into these cases with that feeling, and in our DNA, Ben, you and I both, come from cut from the same cloth. We're bred to trust our doctors. And it's just hard to believe when you see a case that there's been a real bad screw up. You want to give the benefit of the doubt to the healthcare provider, and that's what juries do most of the time. They win. The healthcare providers win about 80 or 90% of these cases at trial.
Do they really? So even the ones that meet the threshold that's now higher than ever to take to trial,
right?
The winning percentage is that low?
That's correct. Now, what's happening is the doctors in the hospitals, they're settling the cases that are bad for them. They don't want to go to trial with a case. If I've worked up a case and it's a really good case for the patient, really bad damages, there's a high likelihood I'm going to get that case settled. I'm going to get a lot of money for my client, and we'll never see the courtroom. But there are cases, many of them, where the case isn't so good. It hadn't been worked up properly, and when it does get to court, the defendant says, I'm going to roll the dice on this one because I know more likely than not I'm going to win. They've got better odds in a courtroom than you've got going to Vegas and playing blackjack.
Really? Fascinating.
Yeah.
Oversight of doctors in general, how would you say it is in Tennessee?
I think it's pretty good. I think they're real good at policing themselves. Now, when you bring a lawsuit against them, they're going to lawyer up and they're going to doctor up. I mean, that's just the way it is. The insurance carrier wants to protect not only their assets but also the reputation of the doctor. I totally understand that. But outside of the legal realm, I do think doctors do a very good job policing themselves, and they know who the bad apples are. And I've always said probably about 5 to 10% of the doctors commit 90% of the negligence. So most of your doctors are really good. They're competent. They know exactly what they're doing, and they know who the bad ones are. And the thing about the bad ones, Ben, they're repeat offenders.
Well, now that's disturbing, because it seems like then their license should be suspended or taken away if it's kind of that small percentage.
Yeah, it's hard to do that because there's a difference between being negligent, simply being careless in a case with very, very bad consequences, or doing something that's illegal that could get you suspended, whether it's writing narcotics without a prescription or really, really bad care. I think the idea is we have a compensation system, let it work, let the doctor keep practicing. Everyone's going to make a mistake. It's the people who do really bad things who should be suspended.
So I'm always interested just to talk to you about cases, cases you have, or I read this one, woman sues hospital, says doctor was drinking before delivering baby.
Right.
So thing about delivering a baby, it's a happy time, people have cameras often, and so this doctor, it's all on camera.
Right.
So the family recorded it.
You wouldn't believe it, would you, if you didn't read it as a report from a respected news outlet, and they reported themselves that it was all on camera.
And so how unusual is that? I guess, I don't know, a baby, I guess a doctor could be called in when they don't expect to be called in. In this situation, I think he's not very smart. No. So he's overtly talking about drinking and his favorite drink, and he's delivering a baby. So that's disturbing.
I think what may even be more disturbing than that, Ben, is the actions of the nurses. The nurses that are kind of goading him on and getting a kick out of it, while the most delicate time you can think of delivering of a baby is going on, and they're sitting there asking him how many drinks he had, did he have fun, he comes in his Bermuda shorts. They see all this, and where's the nurse saying, whoa, stop, get on the phone, call the on-call OB and tell the guy, get out of here, go home? Where is that? And that's what disturbs me more about that story, frankly, than actually the drunk doctor. Is there's no one there, there's no safety valve there to make sure this guy doesn't touch a patient. That's a culture problem, and that's one of the reasons why in lawsuits we have punitive damages, is to punish that kind of behavior, because sometimes you have to really sting them hard in the wallet before they will make personnel changes, because that's every patient should expect that nurses will protect them as much as doctors.
That's interesting. You say that's a culture problem. And where is that currently, that case? Did it get settled, or do we know?
I don't know. I got the same information you did from the article. It looks like to me, from what I'm seeing, that it's in litigation.
Right.
But we don't know how far it is. But again, that is a hospital culture problem. And every once in a while you'll run into that, and that's when you talk about out of control. That's a culture that's out of control, and a lot of times the only way to change that is financial consequences, where they make decisions from top down.
All right, we're going to take a break. If you want to call in, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We'll take a break. We'll take your calls and talk about some more of Clint Kelly's cases here. Be back right after this.